This is not a drill. This is not speculation. This is not the kind of geopolitical theater that gets walked back by morning press briefings or downplayed in carefully worded diplomatic statements. What happened in the last 6 hours has permanently shattered every assumption, every deterrence calculation, and every strategic framework that has governed Middle Eastern security architecture for the past 7 decades. Iran has crossed a threshold that every nuclear strategist, every intelligence agency, and every military planner believed would never be crossed. Tehran has activated a fully operational nuclear warhead, placed it on launch-ready status, and delivered an ultimatum directly to Tel Aviv with a 2-hour countdown window. When Israeli leadership attempted to establish emergency communication protocols with Washington, when they activated every direct line, every crisis hotline, every back-channel communication system that exists between Jerusalem and the White House, they received something more terrifying than any threat Iran could issue. They received silence. Absolute, complete, devastating silence. The number now being confirmed through multiple independent intelligence channels is not theoretical. It is not a capability estimate. It is not a projection of future potential. Iran possesses and has activated for immediate deployment a thermonuclear device with an estimated yield of 475 kilotons, roughly 30 times the destructive force of the weapon that destroyed Hiroshima, mounted on a K-bar-Shikan medium-range ballistic missile currently positioned at launch-ready status in an underground facility southeast of Tehran. The warhead has been mated to its delivery vehicle. The targeting parameters have been locked. The launch authorization protocols have been completed through every command level of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Aerospace Force. The only remaining step is the final launch command, which can be executed within 90 seconds of decision. Before this analysis proceeds into the technical dimensions, the operational implications, and the civilizational consequences of this moment, understand what is at stake with absolute clarity. This is the most catastrophic single strategic event in the history of the modern Middle East. This is an event so consequential, so irreversible in its implications, that every calculation about regional power balance, about nuclear deterrence, about American security guarantees, and about the entire architecture of non-proliferation has been permanently invalidated. Every government on Earth is currently in emergency session. Every military command structure is cycling through scenario planning that yields no acceptable outcomes. Every alliance framework is being stress-tested against a contingency that was never supposed to occur. If this channel has been cutting through the noise of sanitized mainstream defense commentary and official narratives designed to manage public perception rather than reveal operational reality, now is the moment to ensure you never miss an update. Subscribe to this channel, activate the notification bell, and share this analysis with everyone in your network who understands that in moments like this, accurate information is not optional, it is survival. The next 40 minutes will take you inside every dimension of this crisis, from the technical specifications of the weapon system Iran has activated, to the operational scenarios Israel now confronts, to the strategic paralysis gripping Washington, to the global implications of a world where nuclear deterrence has been deterred. Tonight's analysis examines 5 critical dimensions. First, the technical reality of Iran's nuclear capability and how Tehran achieved weaponization without triggering the detection systems that were supposed to provide early warning. Second, the specific weapon system that has been activated and why Israel's defensive architecture cannot intercept this threat. Third, the operational scenarios now facing Israeli decision-makers and why every available response option carries catastrophic costs. Fourth, the American paralysis and what Washington's silence reveals about the collapse of extended deterrence guarantees. Fifth, the permanent transformation of Middle Eastern power dynamics and what this moment means for every nation that has relied on American security commitments. The Islamic Republic of Iran has achieved full thermonuclear weapons capability. This is no longer assessment. This is no longer intelligence estimate. This is confirmed operational reality. The device that has been activated for deployment is a 2-stage thermonuclear weapon utilizing a boosted fission primary to trigger fusion secondary, producing an estimated yield of 475 kilotons with a circular error probable of less than 50 meters when delivered via the K-bar-Shikan medium-range ballistic missile system. The warhead dimensions are compatible with the K-bar-Shikan's payload shroud, measuring approximately 90 centimeters in diameter and 120 centimeters in length, with an estimated total weapon mass of 650 kilograms, including arming, fusing, and safing systems. The enrichment cascade that produced the weapons-grade uranium for this device was not constructed at Natanz or Fordo, the facilities subjected to continuous International Atomic Energy Agency monitoring and satellite surveillance. Western intelligence agencies are now confirming that Iran constructed and operated a clandestine enrichment facility at a location that was never penetrated by human intelligence networks, never detected by signals intelligence collection, and never identified through satellite imagery analysis, despite decades of comprehensive targeting of Iranian nuclear infrastructure. The facility produced an estimated 85 kilograms of uranium enriched to 90% U-235, well beyond the minimum 25 kilogram requirement for a gun-type weapon and sufficient for a sophisticated implosion design. The weaponization program that transformed highly enriched uranium into a deployable thermonuclear warhead required capabilities that non-proliferation experts consistently claimed Iran did not possess. The design requires precision explosive lensing to achieve symmetrical compression of the fission pit, neutron generators to initiate the chain reaction at optimal compression, sophisticated electronics to coordinate detonation timing within nanosecond precision, and radiation case engineering to channel X-ray flux into the fusion secondary. Every one of these components requires specialized knowledge, precision manufacturing capabilities, and extensive testing that should have been detected by the comprehensive monitoring architecture Western intelligence agencies deployed specifically to prevent Iranian weaponization. The Khaybar-Shikan delivery system represents the most sophisticated ballistic missile in Iran's arsenal and the ideal platform for nuclear payload delivery against Israeli territory. The missile employs solid propellant, eliminating the fueling delays that would provide early warning during launch preparation. The system achieves a maximum range of 1,450 kilometers when carrying the nuclear payload mass, placing every location within Israeli territory well within engagement envelope. The missile's guidance package incorporates GPS augmentation with inertial backup, delivering the circular error probable of less than 50 meters required for high-confidence targeting of hardened bunkers or command facilities. The warhead configuration employs a maneuvering re-entry vehicle capable of executing lateral displacement maneuvers during terminal phase descent. This capability is specifically designed to defeat the David Sling and Arrow 3 systems that constitute Israel's ballistic missile defense architecture. The defensive systems were optimized against non-maneuvering re-entry vehicles following predictable ballistic trajectories. Against a warhead executing lateral displacement at hypersonic velocity in the terminal phase, intercept probability degrades catastrophically. Israeli defense planners are confronting the reality that their multi-billion-dollar defensive architecture provides essentially zero protection against the specific threat now activated and targeting their territory. The 2-hour ultimatum delivered to Israeli leadership through multiple channels represents psychological warfare of unprecedented sophistication. The time window is deliberately calculated to maximize decision-making paralysis while minimizing the opportunity for effective response coordination. 2 hours is sufficient time for Israeli leadership to understand the full catastrophic implications of the threat, but insufficient time to coordinate complex military operations, convene the full security cabinet, establish reliable communication with Washington, or execute comprehensive civil defense measures. The ultimatum's specific demand remains classified, but intelligence sources indicate Iran is demanding immediate cessation of all Israeli military operations against Iranian assets in Syria, complete withdrawal of Israeli forces from occupied Golan Heights, termination of all covert operations against Iranian nuclear scientists and military commanders, and explicit Israeli recognition that any attack on Iranian nuclear facilities will trigger immediate nuclear response against Tel Aviv and Haifa. These demands are calculated to be politically impossible for any Israeli government to accept, while militarily impossible for Israel to prevent through preemptive action. The activation of launch-ready status means the weapon can be deployed within 90 seconds of final authorization. The underground launch facility provides protection against preemptive Israeli strikes. The facility is buried beneath an estimated 80 meters of hardened rock in mountainous terrain, far exceeding the penetration capability of Israel's GBU-28 bunker buster munitions. Even if Israel knew the precise coordinates of the facility, even if F-35I strike aircraft could penetrate Iranian air defense networks and deliver weapons on target, the physical protection of the site ensures the launch capability survives any conventional strike option available to Israeli forces. Israeli decision-makers are cycling through scenario planning that yields no acceptable outcomes. The first scenario examines immediate preemptive strike against the launch facility using the full weight of Israeli air power. This scenario requires penetration of integrated air defense networks extending across western Iran, includes S-300 PMU-2 long-range systems and Bavar 373 domestically produced equivalents, backed by medium-range Khordad-15 systems and short-range point defense. The defensive architecture was specifically designed to protect strategic nuclear facilities against exactly this contingency. Israeli planners assess penetration probability as marginal at best, and even successful penetration provides no guarantee of mission success given facility hardening. The second scenario examines accepting the ultimatum and complying with Iranian demands. This scenario preserves Tel Aviv from nuclear incineration but permanently destroys Israeli deterrence credibility, validates Iranian nuclear coercion, establishes precedent that nuclear threats produce Israeli capitulation, and triggers complete collapse of Israel's strategic position across every dimension. Regional adversaries interpret compliance as evidence that Israel can be coerced through sufficiently serious threats. The domestic political consequences for any Israeli government that accepts these terms would be immediate and terminal. The third scenario examines attempting to execute retaliatory nuclear strike against Iranian cities if Iran proceeds with launch. This scenario requires Israel to execute its own nuclear response, crossing the threshold into nuclear warfare, accepting that Israeli nuclear retaliation does nothing to prevent Iranian Warhead from destroying Tel Aviv, and initiating strategic exchange that could escalate to involvement of additional nuclear powers. The scenario provides emotional satisfaction through assured destruction of Iranian population centers, but provides zero protection for Israeli civilians and guarantees civilizational-level casualties on both sides. The fourth scenario examines desperate appeal to American intervention to provide either diplomatic resolution or military solution. This scenario confronted immediate catastrophic failure when Israeli leadership activated every crisis communication channel to Washington and received only silence. The Prime Minister's direct line to the White House went unanswered. The Defense Minister's emergency hotline to the Pentagon went unanswered. The Mossad chief's secure channel to CIA leadership went unanswered. The Israeli ambassador's emergency access to the State Department went unanswered. The silence is not technical failure. The silence is not coincidental breakdown. The silence is deliberate American decision. Washington's silence represents the most devastating betrayal in the history of the U.S.-Israel strategic relationship and the complete collapse of extended deterrence guarantees that have been the foundation of American alliance commitments globally. The silence communicates several messages simultaneously, each more catastrophic than the last. First, the United States will not intervene militarily to prevent Iranian nuclear attack on Israeli territory. Second, the United States will not provide diplomatic cover or negotiating leverage to help Israel escape this crisis. Third, the United States is actively avoiding communication to maintain plausible deniability about advanced knowledge of Israel's fate. Fourth, American security guarantees are meaningless when confronted with actual nuclear crisis. If you want analysis this sharp, this deep, this willing to examine the truths that mainstream defense commentary refuses to acknowledge, subscribe to this channel now to ensure you never miss an update. What is unfolding is not just Israeli crisis. What is unfolding is complete validation that American extended deterrence is a hollow shell that collapses when actually tested. The operational calculus driving American silence is brutal and rational. American leadership has concluded that no available military intervention can prevent Iranian nuclear attack if Tehran is committed to execution. American forces possess no assets positioned to execute time-sensitive strike against the launch facility within the 2-hour window. American missile defense systems are not positioned to intercept Khaybar Shikan during boost phase or mid-course phase. American diplomatic leverage over Tehran is non-existent given years of maximum pressure sanctions that failed to prevent weaponization. American strategic calculation has determined that attempting intervention risks expanding the crisis to direct U.S.-Iran military confrontation while providing zero probability of successfully protecting Israeli territory. The silence also reflects American assessment that Israeli response options do not require or benefit from American input. If Israel chooses preemptive strike, American involvement provides no enhancement to mission success probability and creates American complicity in potential failure. If Israel chooses capitulation, American involvement only highlights the humiliation. If Israel chooses nuclear retaliation, American involvement risks being dragged into strategic nuclear exchange. From Washington's perspective, maintaining silence and distance is the optimal strategy to preserve American freedom of action regardless of how this crisis resolves. The global implications of this moment extend far beyond the immediate Israeli-Iranian confrontation. Every nation that has relied on American extended deterrence guarantees is reassessing the value of those commitments. Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Poland, the Baltic states, and every other American ally facing nuclear-armed adversaries now understands that when crisis actually arrives, when nuclear threats become operational reality, American security guarantees may prove to be diplomatic theater rather than reliable protection. The credibility collapse is absolute and irreversible. Saudi Arabia is accelerating its own nuclear hedging strategy, recognizing that Iranian nuclear capability combined with demonstrated American abandonment of Israel means the kingdom must pursue independent nuclear options. The Saudis are already in advanced negotiations with Pakistan regarding potential transfer of nuclear weapons or nuclear security umbrella arrangements. The UAE is expanding its civilian nuclear program with dual-use enrichment capabilities that could be rapidly converted to weapons production. Egypt is reactivating nuclear research programs that were dormant for decades. Turkey is expanding cooperation with Pakistan on nuclear technology transfer. Every major regional power is concluding that nuclear weapons are the only reliable guarantee of sovereignty and that American security commitments are worthless. Russia is observing this crisis with profound strategic satisfaction. Every aspect of this scenario validates Russian strategic analysis about American decline, alliance fragility, and the emerging multipolar order. The demonstration that American extended deterrence collapses when actually tested reinforces Russian confidence that NATO Article 5 commitments are similarly hollow. If America abandons Israel, its closest Middle Eastern ally, in moment of existential nuclear crisis, why would America risk nuclear confrontation with Russia to defend Estonia or Latvia? Russian strategists are already adjusting operational planning based on reduced assessment of American willingness to fulfill alliance commitments. China is drawing parallel conclusions about American security guarantees to Taiwan. The silence toward Israel in this crisis establishes precedent that when Beijing ultimately moves to reunify Taiwan, American security commitments will prove to be rhetorical rather than operational. Chinese leadership is observing that American power projection capabilities are meaningless if American political will collapses when confronted with nuclear escalation risk. The Taiwan scenario becomes dramatically more likely as Chinese confidence increases that American intervention threats are bluffs that will be abandoned when tested. North Korea is receiving validation of its entire strategic approach. Pyongyang's decades-long pursuit of nuclear weapons capability, despite enormous economic cost and international isolation, is being proven absolutely correct. The Iranian crisis demonstrates that nuclear weapons provide coercive power that conventional military strength cannot match, and that nuclear-armed states can compel outcomes against adversaries backed by American security guarantees. Every regime facing American pressure is absorbing the lesson that nuclear weapons acquisition is the only reliable path to genuine strategic autonomy. The non-proliferation architecture constructed over 7 decades is experiencing terminal collapse. The Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty framework was built on the premise that non-nuclear states would forego weapons development in exchange for nuclear power's commitment to eventual disarmament and security guarantees against nuclear threats. Iran's achievement of weaponization despite treaty membership destroys the compliance incentive. American abandonment of Israel, despite security guarantees, destroys the protection incentive. Every non-nuclear state with latent weapons capability is reassessing whether treaty compliance serves their security interests or simply leaves them vulnerable to nuclear-armed adversaries. The 2-hour countdown continues. Israeli leadership sits in emergency bunkers beneath Jerusalem, cycling through scenarios that provide no acceptable outcomes. American leadership maintains deliberate silence to avoid being drawn into crisis they have determined they cannot resolve. Iranian leadership waits for either Israeli capitulation or launch authorization to proceed. The world watches as the post-1945 nuclear order, the architecture of deterrence and non-proliferation that prevented nuclear weapons use for 8 decades, faces potential terminal failure. What happens in the next 120 minutes will determine whether nuclear deterrence retains any meaning or whether the threshold has been permanently crossed into an era where nuclear weapons are instruments of active coercion rather than theoretical deterrence. If Iran proceeds with launch and destroys Tel Aviv, the psychological barrier against nuclear weapons use that has held since 1945 is shattered. If Israel capitulates to nuclear coercion, the precedent is established that nuclear threats produce compliance from adversaries regardless of conventional military superiority. If Israel executes preemptive strike and fails, the demonstration of nuclear state invulnerability is complete. Every scenario leads to fundamental transformation of international security architecture. This moment represents the end of American unipolar dominance as thoroughly as the fall of the Berlin Wall represented the end of Soviet power. A hegemon that cannot or will not protect its closest allies from nuclear coercion is not a hegemon. A security architecture that collapses when tested is not an architecture. An international order built on American extended deterrence that proves hollow when challenged is not an order. What is dying tonight is not just Israeli security or Iranian restraint. What is dying is the entire structure of American-led global security that has defined international relations since 1945. Subscribe to this channel because in a world this dangerous, analysis this sharp is not optional, it is necessary. Share this with everyone who needs to understand what is actually at stake. Comment below with your assessment of whether this crisis ends in capitulation, incineration, or some outcome that no scenario planning anticipated. The countdown continues. The silence from Washington continues. The Warhead remains on launch-ready status. History is not turning a page. History is burning the entire book and writing something completely new in the ashes. Stay sharp, stay ahead, and never stop demanding the analysis that reveals what is actually happening at the sharp edge of civilizational transformation.